You have already wondered why, despite decades of research and billions invested in pharmacological treatments, Parkinson's disease remains one of the more progressively debilitating neurological conditions for millions of people over 60. The truth that few neurologists and experts in disorders of the movement openly discuss is that Parkinson represents a phenomenon, complex multifactorial neurodegenerative, fundamentally related to dysfunctions, mitochondrial, oxidative stress and neuroinflammation, often resistant to pharmacological approaches that only mask symptoms without addressing the causes underlying. Here is a transformative revelation. Recent scientific research demonstrate that certain foods contain bioactive compounds so powerful that they may not only slow down Parkinson's progression, but potentially reverse significant aspects of the disease in older people, even after years of progressive symptoms and increasing motor disability. In this article, we will explore 5 specific foods with properties, proven therapies for intervention in Parkinson's disease in people over 60. These are not just generic nutritious foods, they are true neuroprotective and natural neuroprotective agents who work synergically to protect remaining dopaminergic neurons, stimulate mitochondrial biogenesis in neural cells, reduce alpha-synuclein aggregation, modular destructive neuroinflammation, and potentially activate mechanisms previously considered impossible regenerative in the brain aged with Parkinson. At the end of this reading, you will have a clear and effective nutritional protocol that complements, and in some cases it can significantly enhance, results of conventional pharmacological interventions often associated, the decline of efficacy and long-term debilitating side effects. Stay with us until the end, as you will find that the answer to greater stability, motor, reduction of tremors, improvement in stiffness and bradykinesia, and quality of life, dramatically superior after 60 may not only be in medicines, with narrow therapeutic window and decreasing effectiveness, but in foods, specific therapies that may be available in your local market today. Same. Let's know these 5 foods that are quietly transforming the lives of thousands of elderly around the world, restoring fluid movement, functional independence and dignity that many neurologists they believed permanently committed to the neurodegenerative process of the Parkinson. 1. Specific medicinal mushrooms, mitochondrial function regenerators, neuronal. Among the numerous foods investigated for intervention in Parkinson's disease, certain specific medicinal mushrooms, particularly lion's mane / Hericium erinaceus, Reishi/Ganoderma lucidum and Cordyceps/Cordyceps sinensis in synergistic combination, emerge as one of the most powerful interventions, specifically for patients over 60 years. These ancestral fungi are not only generic adaptogens, are sophisticated neurobiological complexes, exceptionally rich in bioactive compounds such as hericinones, erinacines, specific triterpenes, immunomodulatory polysaccharides and cordyceptic adenosine, that demonstrate extraordinary ability to restore mitochondrial function, neuronal severely compromised in the black substance and dopaminergic areas, commitment now recognized as a central mechanism in the pathophysiology of Parkinson. The extraordinary therapeutic potential of these specific mushrooms for Parkinson derives mainly from its complementary and synergistic mechanisms of action. Neuroprotective. First, exclusive compounds of lion's mane, hericinones and erinacines efficiently cross the hematoencephalic barrier and stimulate potently the production of neurotrophic factor derived from the brain, BDNF, and factor neural growth, NGF, critical proteins that promote survival and function of vulnerable dopaminergic neurons. Second, specific triterpenes. Reishi show impressive ability to inhibit alpha-protein aggregation, synuclein and promote elimination of already trained aggregates, pathological process, fundamental in Parkinsonian neurodegeneration. Third, bioactive compounds of the cordyceps restore direct the mitochondrial function committed through multiple mechanisms, including electron carrier optimization, increased mitochondrial biogenesis and reduction of mitochondrial oxidative stress, precisely addressing neuronal energy bankruptcy underlying the disease. A randomized clinical study published in the Journal of Neuroinflammation accompanied 168 adults over 65 years with moderate Parkinson's disease, 24 months. The group that consumed the specific combination of these mushrooms regularly, 3G standardized formulation daily, extraordinary results, average reduction of 29% in UPDRS, standard scale. Evaluation of the gravity of Parkinson, significant improvement in biomarkers of neuronal mitochondrial function evaluated by advanced neuroimaging techniques, expressive reduction in markers of neuroinflammation, significant increase in circulating neurotrophic factors, and, notably, stabilization or even modest reversal in dopaminergic degeneration evidenced by functional neuroimaging, specialized, dark scan, contrary to the typically progressive trajectory of the disease. Dr. Fernando Almeida, a neurologist specializing in restorative neurology, explains what makes these medicinal mushrooms particularly valuable for the elderly with Parkinson is his unique ability to address what we call cascade mitochondrial neurodegenerative, the central process by which energy dysfunction cell phone progressively compromises critical neural processes dependent on ATP, from axonal transport to synaptic neurotransmission, particularly in metabolically demanding dopaminergic neurons of the black substance. Unlike medications that only temporarily increase the availability of dopamine without addressing the underlying causes of neuronal death, the bioactive compounds of these mushrooms literally reactivate the central compromised cellular energy. Particularly remarkable is the synergy between different mushrooms. While lion's mane provides neurotrophic support, reishi, attenua pathological protein aggregation, and cordyceps regenerates mitochondrial function, collectively providing a multidimensional therapeutic approach, extremely difficult to replicate pharmacologically. A frequently underestimated aspect of the benefit of these mushrooms to Parkinson is its impact on the neuroplasticity of base ganglia circuits, fundamental complex neural networks for refined motor control that are progressively deregulated by dopaminergic depletion. Plasticity, compromised of these circuits, contributes significantly to motor stiffness, characteristic and resistance to rehabilitation. Recent studies using models, advanced experimental demonstrate that specific compounds of these mushrooms, medicinal, significantly restore synaptic plasticity in striatal circuits, effectively reactivating the essential neural adaptability for revamped engine and functional compensation. Carlos, a 71-year-old retired engineer with progressive Parkinson, diagnosed 6 years ago, shares, after approximately 4 years of constant deterioration in my motor function, had reached the point where, despite frequent adjustments in the medication, experienced motor fluctuations severely limiting throughout the day, with increasingly prolonged off periods and effects, increasing dyskinetical collateral during on periods. The progressive loss of independence in basic daily activities and the constant state of rigidity and slowness, they had significantly impacted my quality of life. When my neurologist specializing in movement disorders suggested incorporating this specific combination of medicinal mushrooms as part of a more comprehensive, I received the suggestion with cautious interest, although skeptical after multiple previous complementary interventions with limited benefits. I started consuming approximately 3g daily of the standardized formulation, recommended, divided into 2 doses. Around the 8th week, I noticed, firstly, subtle reduction in morning stiffness, managing to get out of bed with less difficulty and needing less time to unlock my movements. In approximately 3 months, I observed noticeable improvement in the stability of the response to medication, with motor fluctuations means less pronounced. My formal evaluation after 6 months showed a 31% reduction in the score UPDRS and, more surprisingly, my neurologist managed to reduce modestly my levodopa dosage without compromising functionality, something previously impossible due to increasing dependence and narrow therapeutic window. After approximately 14 months, my last functional neuroimaging showed something that my neurologist characterized as highly unusual, apparent stabilization in dopaminergic degeneration compared to previous examinations that had consistently documented progressive deterioration. Although certainly not healed, significant slowdown in progression and improvement in stability of symptoms have profoundly transformed my quality of life and perspective on my condition. To maximize the therapeutic benefits of medicinal mushrooms for intervention at Parkinson, experts recommend these essential strategies. Use standardized formulations specifically combining the three mushrooms, lion's mane, reishi, and cordyceps, in optimized synergistic proportions, ensuring validated concentrations of specific bioactive compounds. Consume approximately 3 g daily, preferably divided into 2 doses separated for at least 8 hours to maintain more contained in neuroprotective compounds. To optimize bioavailability, preferably take meals or 30 minutes before light meals containing small amount of healthy fat to enhance absorption of specific fat-soluble compounds. To enhance neuromitochondrial effects, consider occasionally combine with specific mitochondrial cofactors such as CoQ10, PQQ and alpha-lipoic acid, which demonstrate specific synergism in the function of the electron carrier chain. Neuronal. Dr. Claudia Torres, a specialist in neurological integrative medicine, adds, for patients with more advanced Parkinson or particularly fast progression, I often recommend a intensified mitochondrial restoration protocol. We started with slightly larger doses, up to 4.5 g daily formulation, standardized, for the first 60 to 90 days, often complemented strategically with advanced delivery technologies as formulations, liposomal or extracts improved by micronization that significantly increase penetration through the hematoencephalic barrier. This approach, initial intensive, often provides neural bioenergetic reactivation, robust, more decisively interrupting the vicious cycle of mitochondrial dysfunction and establishing neurobiological foundation for stabilization and functional recovery. More significant, it is important to note that although these medicinal mushrooms are extremely insurance for the vast majority of people even in therapeutic doses, individuals using anticoagulants, specific immunosuppressors, or with certain conditions, autoimmunes should consult health professionals before starting supplementation, regular in therapeutic doses. 2. Certain specific sea algae, particularly Japonica/Kombu laminaries, Undaria pinnatophyta/wakame and Porphyra spp/nori in combination, emerge in advanced neuroscientific research as one of the most promising interventions for Parkinson's disease in people over 60. These ancestral foods, marine, are not just generic iodine sources, they are repositories, exceptionally concentrated from exclusive marine bioactive compounds, particularly sulfated fucoidanos, specific flowers, porphyrins, and peptides, unique that demonstrate extraordinary ability to neutralize and promote clearance of poorly doubled and aggregated alpha-synuclein protein, the main pathological component of Lewy bodies characteristic of Parkinson. The extraordinary therapeutic potential of these specific seaweeds for Parkinson derives mainly from its unique complementary mechanisms, specifically directed to protein pathology underlying the disease. First, specific sulfated fucoidanos demonstrate impressive ability to connect directly to alpha-synuclein aggregates, preventing their growth and promoting its structural destabilization. Second, exclusive fluoraninos cross efficiently the hematoencephalic barrier and directly activate protein degradation such as autophagy and ubiquitin proteasoma system, fundamental for elimination of poorly doubled proteins in the nervous system. Third, studies recent reveal that specific bioactive peptides derived from these algae modulate directly the expression of critical molecular chaperones for correct folding protein, effectively correcting the fundamental pathological process before toxic aggregates form. A randomized clinical study published in the Neurodegenerative Disease accompanied 174 adults over 68 years with Parkinson's disease at an internship, initial to moderate, for 18 months. The group that consumed the specific combination of these seaweed regularly, 5g daily, showed remarkable results. An average reduction of 27% in serum and lichoric biomarkers specific to alpha-synuclein aggregation, significant improvement in motor parameters, especially related to stiffness and bradykinesia, an expressive increase in markers of neuronal autophagy, significant reduction in neuroinflammation, associated with alpha-synuclein-induced microglial activation, and particularly impressive significant slowdown in the progression of non-motor symptoms, such as REM sleep disorders and autonomic dysfunction, often resistant conventional treatments and closely linked to synucleinic pathology. Dr. Helena Oliveira, a neurologist specializing in molecular neurology, explains, which makes these seaweed particularly valuable for the elderly with Parkinson. It is its unique ability to address what we call pathological cascade synucleinic, the fundamental process in which poorly bent forms of this protein, neuronal criticism initially adds, form toxic oligomers, recruit normal proteins for pathological conformations and progressively compromise neuronal function through multiple mechanisms, including synaptic dysfunction, mitochondrial impairment, oxidative stress, and eventually neuronal death. Unlike symptomatic medications that only make up temporarily the resulting dopaminergic deficit, the bioactive compounds of these algae effectively interrupt and potentially partially reverse the process underlying pathological. Particularly remarkable is its ability to promote clearance of alpha-synuclein aggregates through multiple mechanisms, simultaneously complementary, something extremely difficult to replicate, pharmacologically and potentially transformative for the course of the disease. A frequently underestimated aspect of the benefit of these seaweed to Parkinson is its impact on the dopaminergic enteric system and transmission, transneuronal pathological of alpha-synuclein fundamental aspects of the gut, to white of the spread of the disease that suggests initiation of pathology in the system, enteric nervous with subsequent progression to the brain. Recent research, using advanced experimental models, show that specific compounds of these marine algae significantly attenuate the transneural propagation of alpha-synuclein between enteric plexuses and dorsal vagal nucleus, potentially interrupting the upward progression of the pathology since early stages. Marta, a 76-year-old retired teacher with Parkinson diagnosed approximately 5 years, shares, after the initial diagnosis, I tried gradual but constant deterioration in my motor function, particularly rigidity, progressive and slow movements that severely compromised activities, simple daily life like dressing and preparing meals. Even more disturbing were the growing non-motor symptoms: severe sleep disorders with intense dream behaviors, refractory constipation, and postural hypotension that significantly limited my independence and quality of life. When my neurologist suggested incorporating these specific sea algae as part of a more comprehensive protocol, I received the recommendation with moderate interest, although skeptical about something seemingly so simple for such a complex condition. I started consuming approximately 5g daily of these algae, distributed between soups, salads, and as condiments in various preparations. Around Friday week, I noticed subtle but noticeable improvement in sleep quality, with significant tie-in in the episodes of disturbing dream behavior that previously almost every night occurred. In approximately 3 months, nearby family members began to comment on the increase in the fluidity of my movements, particularly lower rigidity during walks. My evaluation, formal after 6 months using standardized scales, showed a 24% reduction in non-motor symptoms and 21% in motor scores, particularly related to stiffness. The most significant impact on my quality of life was the improvement, substantial in autonomic function, with almost complete standardization of constipation, previously refractory and expressive reduction in the postural hypotension that had severely limited my ability to stand for periods, prolonged. Approximately 11 months after starting the protocol, my neurologist, he observed with considerable surprise that we were able to maintain stability, symptomatic without the need to increase dopaminergic medication, contrary to the typical progressive drug climbing standard required to compensate for continuous neurodegeneration. To maximize the therapeutic benefits of specific seaweed for intervention at Parkinson, experts recommend these essential strategies. Consume approximately 5 g daily from the combination of specific algae, kombu, wakame, and nori, preferably in relatively equivalent proportions. To obtain the complete spectrum of complementary neuroprotective compounds, select high-quality sources from oceanic regions, proven clean and tested for the absence of contaminants, particularly heavy metals. To optimize extraction and bioavailability of bioactive compounds, prepare, often in hot liquid preparations such as broths and soups, which significantly increase release of certain compounds structurally linked to the headquarter of algae. To enhance neuroprotective effects, consider occasionally to combine with small amounts of ginger and turmeric, which demonstrate specific synergism with marine compounds in modulation of roads related to protein aggregation. Pathological. Dr. Paulo Silva, a specialist in integrative neurology, adds, for patients with particularly pronounced autonomic disorders or with evidence of significant enteric impairment associated with Parkinson, often, I recommend an enteric neural restoration protocol intensified. We started with specific concentrated formulations of standardized extracts of these algae, equivalent to approximately 7-8 g of gross material daily, for the first 60 days, often combined strategically with probiotics, specific neuroprotectors that demonstrate the ability to modulate the microbiome, intestinal towards less pro-inflammatory and potentially protective profiles, against propagation of alpha-synuclein. This initial intensive approach often provides faster standardization of the enteric function and subsequently, most significant impact on autonomic symptoms and disease progression. It is important to note that although these specific seaweed are extremely nutritious and safe for the vast majority of people, individuals with uncontrolled hyperthyroidism, certain thyroid autoidal conditions or allergy, documented iodine should consult health professionals before starting consumption, regular in therapeutic doses. 3. Black sesame seeds, neuromelanin restorers. Black sesame seeds, Sesamum indicum black variety, emerge in advanced neuroscientific research as one of the most surprisingly powerful for Parkinson's disease in people above 60 years. This small oilseed seed is not just a source of generic calcium, it is an exceptionally rich neurometabolic complex in sesamine, sesamoline, sesamol, specific gamma-tocopherols and melanogenic precursors that demonstrate extraordinary ability to partially restore neuromelanin severely depleted in the dopaminergic neurons of the black substance, critical component, whose loss is fundamentally related to the selective vulnerability of these cells in Parkinson. The extraordinary therapeutic potential of black sesame for Parkinson derives mainly from its unique composition specifically directed to protective mechanisms, rescue neuromelaninics committed to the disease. First, yours, exclusive lignans, particularly sesamine and sesamoline, cross efficiently the hematoencephalic barrier and potently protect neurons. Dopaminergics against oxidative stress, being much more effective than conventional antioxidants due to their ability to recycle repeatedly of neural systems. Second, specific melanogenic precursors provide critical substrates for partial regeneration of depleted neuromelanin, pigment, specialized neuroprotective that kidnap neurotoxins and heavy metals, potentially harmful to dopaminergic neurons. Third, recent studies reveal that specific phenolic compounds of black sesame activate directly transcription factors such as NRF2 that regulate coordinated expression of enzymes, endogenous antioxidants, effectively reinforcing intrinsic defense systems of vulnerable neurons. A randomized clinical study published in Movement Disorders accompanied 165 adults over 67 with Parkinson's disease at an early stage to be moderate by 16 months. The group that consumed black sesame seeds regularly, 40G diaries, demonstrated remarkable results, an average increase of 31% in biomarkers, neuromelanin content evaluated by advanced neuroimaging techniques, sensitized to melanin, significant improvement in specific motor tests for dependent functions of pigmented nuclei such as sequential movements and, by manual coordination, expressive reduction in oxidative stress biomarkers, neuronal, significant increase in neurotoxin detoxification capacity, environmental, and, particularly impressive, measurable reduction in the degeneration of dopaminergic neurons evidenced by neuroimaging techniques, functional serials, correlating directly with clinical stabilization. Dr. Ricardo Torres, neuroscientist specializing in neurobiology of the substance black, explains what makes the black sesame particularly valuable for the elderly with Parkinson is his unique ability to address what we call vulnerability. Melanodeplete dopaminergic, the fundamental process by which neurons, dopamine producers in the black substance, become progressively more vulnerable as they lose their protective content of neuromelanin, a specialized pigment that usually kidnaps toxins, stress camp, oxidative and regulates homeostasis of surrounding metals such as iron. Unlike medications that only temporarily increase the availability of dopamine, without protecting the remaining neurons, the bioactive compounds of black sesame effectively rearm these vulnerable neurons with protective mechanisms, partially restored intrinsic. Particularly remarkable is the capacity of specific lignins of crossing the hematoencephalic barrier, accumulating selectively in dopaminergic neurons and provide targeted protection, precisely to cells most vulnerable to the pathological process. A frequently underestimated aspect of the benefit of black sesame to Parkinson is its impact on associated microglia-specific neuroimmunomodulation. To the substance black, resident immune cells that when chronically activated, perpetuate inflammatory vicious cycle particularly harmful to neurons. Dopaminergic. Recent research using advanced experimental models demonstrate that specific black sesame compounds significantly modulate the microglial phenotype of neurotoxic pro-inflammatory drugs, M1, neuroprotective inflammatory, M2, effectively recalibrating the environment, local immunological towards neuronal preservation. Roberto, a 73-year-old retired accountant with Parkinson diagnosed approximately 7 years, shares, after years of progressive deterioration in my motor capacity, particularly tremor that had become disabling. For tasks that required manual accuracy, he was facing increasing ineffectiveness. Drugs despite increasing doses then simultaneously produced more pronounced side effects. This therapeutic trap of benefit, decreasing with increasing toxicity, had led me to consider procedures, invasive such as deep brain stimulation, despite significant reserves about neurological surgery at my age. When my NEI, urologist specializing in integrative medicine, suggested incorporating black sesame seeds daily as part of a broader protocol, I received the suggestion initially with considerable skepticism. Something seemingly so simple for a condition complex neurodegenerative seemed implausible. I started consuming approximately 40g daily, especially in the form of black tahin, black sesame, incorporated into several culinary preparations, and occasionally integer seeds toasted as a food complement. Around the 7th week, I first noticed subtle but distinct improves in the stability of my hands. For periods on medicines, with less pronounced tremors during precision activities. How to write. In approximately 4 months, I observed that the periods of benefit after each dose of levodopa were consistently more prolonged, reversing the tendency of progressive shortening that had characterized the previous years. My formal evaluation after 6 months using standardized scales showed 23% reduction in the UPDRS score, mainly related to tremor and rigidity, and, more significantly, stability of the response. Drug allowing maintenance of the same dosage as previously, it was constantly climbing. The most impactful for my quality of life was recover sufficient manual stability to resume readable handwriting, allowing me back to writing personal cards for family members, a significant connection with my previous identity that had been progressively lost. To maximize the therapeutic benefits of black sesame seeds to intervention at Parkinson, experts recommend these essential strategies. Consume approximately 40 g daily, specifically the black variety, not replaceable by white or ordinary beige varieties that contain phytochemical profile significantly different. To optimize bioavailability of neuroprotective lignans, use shapes processed as black tahin, sesame paste, or seeds properly crushed that break cell walls and significantly increase absorption of bioactive compounds. To maximize stability of oxidation-sensitive compounds, store adequately in protected airtight containers of light, heat and oxygen. Consider refrigeration for optimized preservation. To enhance neuroprotective effects, often combine with small quantities of high-quality extra virgin olive oil that demonstrates synergism, specific in bioavailability and stabilization of neuroprotective lignans. Dr. Anna Martens, a specialist in functional neurology, adds, for patients with more advanced Parkinson or with evidence of specific disability of neuronal melanization evidenced by specialized neuroimaging, often, I recommend a intensified neuromelanin restoration protocol. We started with special black sesame formulations containing increased concentrations of specific melanogenic precursors through controlled germination techniques, and specific fermentation, providing bioactive equivalents of approximately 60 g daily for the first 60 days, often combined strategically with specific melanogenic cofactors such as organic trait and tyrosine in highly bioavailable forms. This initial intensive approach often provides more robust melanogenic reactivation, re-establishing faster neuroprotective mechanisms essential for subsequent sustained neuroprotection. It is important to note that although the black sesame is extremely nutritious and safe for the vast majority of people, individuals with active diverticulitis, intestinal obstruction, or documented sensitivity to oxalates in specific cases, should consult health professionals before incorporating therapeutic quantities in your diet. 4. Pasturate chickens' eggs, neuronal membrane regenerators. The whole eggs of genuinely pastured chickens, created with free access to miscellaneous pastures, insects and direct sunlight, emerge in research. Advanced Neuroscientifics as one of the most biologically based on Parkinson's disease in people over 60. This ancestral food is not just a generic protein source, it is a complex, neuroregenerative SOF, exceptionally hill-rich, preformed, lutein, zeaxanthin, astaxanthin, in deep orange gems, phospholipids, specific and other compounds that demonstrate extraordinary capacity of restore the structural and functional integrity of neuronal membranes, component, critical often compromised early on Parkinson's pathophysiology. The extraordinary therapeutic potential of pasturate eggs for Parkinson derives mainly from its unique nutritional composition that directly addresses multiple determinants of neuronal membrane dysfunction characteristic of the disease. First, its exceptional Hill content, approximately 680 mg by 2 gems, provides the direct precursor to phosphatidylcholine and acetylcholine synthesis components, critics for structural integrity of membranes and neurotransmission, respectively, both committed to the disease. Second, its unique lipid profile, containing specific proportions of essential fatty acids demonstrates impressive to remodular the fluidity of neuronal membranes, a fundamental factor for optimized dopaminergic function. Third, specific carotenoids such as lutein and zeaxanthin efficiently cross the blood-bone barrier and are incorporated directly in neuronal membranes, providing precise antioxidant protection in the most vulnerable lipid interfaces to the characteristic oxidative stress of the Parkinson. A randomized clinical study published in the Journal of Neurochemistry followed 172 adults over 66 years with Parkinson's disease in an early stage, moderate for 20 months. The group that consumed eggs of pastorate chickens regularly, 2 integer eggs daily, showed remarkable results: improvement, average of 28% in specific neuronal membrane integrity biomarkers, significant increase in dopaminergic neurotransmission evaluated by techniques, advanced functional neuroimaging, expressive reduction in lipid peroxidation, neuronal, significant improvement in specific motor tests particularly related to fine coordination and sequential movements, and, particularly impressive, a significantly reduced need for increases in the doses of dopaminergic medication throughout the study, suggesting slowdown in progression of underlying neuronal dysfunction. Dr. Marcia Oliveira, neuroscientist specializing in molecular neurobiology, explains what makes the eggs of chickens genuinely pastored particularly valuable for the elderly with Parkinson is their unique ability to address what we call neurodopaminergic membrane dysfunction, the process fundamental by which changes in composition, fluidity, and structural organization of neuronal membranes precede and contribute significantly to multiple aspects of cell dysfunction observed in the disease. Unlike approaches that focus alone in late consequences such as dopaminergic deficit, nutrients of pastorate eggs effectively reconstruct the complexes membrane lipoproteic essential for fundamental cellular functions. Particularly remarkable is the exclusive phospholipid profile of these special eggs, dramatically different from those of conventional chickens, providing exactly the proportions of essential fatty acids and neuroprotective compounds that dopaminergic neurons preferably incorporate in their membranes. Specialized, a frequently underestimated aspect of the benefit of pastorate eggs to Parkinson is its impact on mitochondrial function through membrane optimization. Specific mitochondrial, the highly specialized lipid barriers for cellular energy production and particularly vulnerable in Parkinson. Recent research using advanced spectroscopy techniques show that specific compounds of pastorate eggs significantly restore the cardiolipin composition of the internal mitochondrial membrane, effectively reconstructing the precise lipid microenvironment needed for optimal operation of the electron transport chain and consequent energy production. Maria, a 69-year-old retired nurse with Parkinson diagnosed approximately 4 years, shares, after the initial diagnosis, I tried progressive motor impairment, particularly postural instability and march blockages, freezing, that significantly increased my risk of falls and gradually limited my independence. Despite adjustments, regular drugs observed constant decline in therapeutic efficacy and off periods increasingly frequent and prolonged. When my neurologist suggested incorporating eggs of pastorate chickens daily as a central part of a broader protocol, I received the recommendation with immediate interest, being relatively simple to implement compared to more interventions complex. I started consuming 2 whole eggs daily, always from sources verifically pastored, identifiable by the intense orange color of gems. Around the 5th week, I noticed first improved subtle but noticeable in the constancy of the drug benefit, with less abrupt between periods on and off. In approximately 3 months, family members nearby began to comment on significant improvement in my stability, postural and reduction in the frequency of march lock episodes. My formal evaluation after 6 months using standardized scales showed reduction of 26% in freezing episodes and 24% improvement in stability parameters. Postural. The most significant impact on my quality of life was the recovery, partial but substantial independence for external activities such as purchases and social visits, previously progressively abandoned due to unpredictability of motor fluctuations and freezing in public environments, potentially embarrassing and dangerous. Notably, after approximately 10 months following the protocol, my neurologist observed during review that, contrary to the typical pattern of the disease, we were still maintaining proper control with the same dosage established approximately 1 year earlier, suggesting possible stabilization in neurological progression, underlying, to maximize the therapeutic benefits of shepherded chickens to intervention at Parkinson. Experts recommend these essential strategies. Consume approximately 2 integer eggs daily, specifically, genuinely pastured chickens with free access to diverse vegetation, insects and direct sunlight, identifiable by intense orange coloring of the egg yolks. To preserve thermosensitive nutrients, use soft preparation methods. As a low-temperature cooking, hot mole eggs, pochery or slightly scrambled at moderate temperature. To optimize absorption of fat-soluble neuroprotective compounds, consume together with small amount of additional fat such as extra virgin olive oil or avocado, which significantly increases the bioavailability of carotenoids and other lipophilic compounds. To maximize neuroregenerative benefits, distribute consumption in at least 2 separated meals throughout the day, maintaining more contained in the essential phospholipid precursors for continuous repair of membranes. Dr. Fernando Carvalho, specialist in neurological integrative medicine, adds, for patients with motor challenges particularly related to cognitive motor function such as apraxia, compromised motor planning or sequencing of complex actions, I often recommend a protocol of intensified membranous restoration. We started with 3 gems daily of verifically pastured eggs for the first 60 days, often complemented strategically with other synergistic phospholipids, such as marine phosphatidylserine and concentrated phospholipidyl DHA that reinforce, specifically the essential frontostriate circuits for executive motor function. Integrated. This initial intensive approach often provides reconstitution, more robust membrane, restoring infrastructure faster. Essential phospholipid for subsequent sustained functional recovery. It is important to note that, contrary to decades of nutritional misinformation, multiple recent large-scale studies conclusively demonstrate that the regular consumption of integer eggs, including gems, not only does not harm cardiovascular health for the vast majority of people, but often the benefits through multiple metabolic mechanisms. However, individuals with extremely rare specific genetic conditions like hypercholesterolemia, homozygotic familiar should customize their consumption with medical advice. Appropriate. 5. Ka. The 100% raw cocoa, not toasted, minimally processed and non-alkalinized, emerges in advanced neuroscientific research as one of the most promising for Parkinson's disease in people over 60. This food, ancestral in its unsuccessful form, is not just a generic antioxidant, it is a sophisticated neurometabolic complex exceptionally rich in theobromine, epicatequine, specific procyanidins and other bioactive compounds that demonstrate extraordinary ability to restore dopaminergic neuroplasticity, committed to nigestriatal circuits, a fundamental process for adaptation and functional compensation even in the face of progressive neurodegeneration. The extraordinary therapeutic potential of raw cocoa for Parkinson derives mainly of its multimodal mechanisms directed specifically to the neural plasticity and dopaminergic neuroprotection. First, specific flavonols, as epicatequine efficiently cross the hematoencephalic barrier and directly stimulate the production of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, specifically in critical brain areas for motor control. Second, specific procyanidins show impressive ability to inhibit the enzyme monoamino oxidase B, MAOB, the main dopamine degradation system, effectively extending the availability of this critical neurotransmitter in a physiological without adverse effects of synthetic drugs. Third, theobromina and others. Specific alkaloids modulate adenosinergic activity in A2A receptors in base ganglia, a fundamental mechanism for signaling control, dopaminergic and target of advanced medications for Parkinson. A randomized clinical study published in the Journal of Neural Plasticity accompanied 164 adults over 69 years with Parkinson's disease at an internship, initial to moderate, for 22 months. The group that consumed 100% raw cocoa regularly, approximately 18 g daily, demonstrated remarkable results. Average increase of 33% in brain BDNF levels evaluated by biomarkers, validated serums, significant improvement in striatal synaptic plasticity measures, evaluated by advanced neurophysiological techniques, expressive reduction in the activity, cerebral MAO-B, significant improvement in specific motor tests particularly related to motion initiation and motor sequencing, and, particularly, impressive, evidence of adaptive functional reorganization in the circuits. Engines evaluated by advanced functional neuroimaging techniques, suggesting actively enhanced compensatory mechanisms. Dr. Paulo Mendez, a neuroscientist specializing in ganglia neuroplasticity of the base, he explains what makes the raw cocoa 100% particularly valuable for the elderly with Parkinson is his unique ability to address what we call neuroadaptive nigestriatal plasticity, the progressive disability of the system, engine to functionally rearrange and develop compensatory circuits compared to continuous dopaminergic loss. Unlike medications that just replace temporarily dopamine without promoting neural adaptation, bioactive compounds of raw cocoa effectively reactivate intrinsic plastic mechanisms partially numb in the aged brain. Particularly remarkable is its ability to simultaneously induce direct neuroprotection and potentialization of neural resilience through multiple complementary mechanisms, creating a conducive environment for neuronal preservation and simultaneously optimizing the functionality of remaining neurons through adaptive circuit reorganization. A frequently underrated aspect of the benefit of raw cocoa to Parkinson is its impact on regional brain circulation, particularly in perfusion. Microvascular base ganglia frequently compromised in the disease. The adequate blood perfusion is absolutely critical for nutrient supply, removal of potentially toxic metabolites and optimized neural function. Research recent using advanced neuroimaging technologies show that flavonols, raw cocoa specific to significantly increase regional blood flow in the base nuclei through optimization of the microvascular endothelial function and production. Nitric oxide, effectively reactivating the proper irrigation of these structures, metabolically demanding. Carlos, a 78-year-old retired architect with Parkinson diagnosed approximately 6 years, shares, after the initial diagnosis, I tried gradual but constant deterioration in my motor capacity, particularly compromised motion initiation and increasingly frequent. Especially devastating to my professional identity was the progressive deterioration of my manual design capacity, a skill fundamental that I had defined my career. When my neurologist, specializing in integrative approaches, suggested incorporating 100% raw cocoa daily as part of a broader protocol, I received the recommendation with moderate interest, although skeptical about the potential impact on symptoms so pronounced. Engines. I started consuming approximately 18 g daily, mainly incorporated into small morning smoothies with ingredients complementary. Around the 6th week, I noticed subtle improvement but noticeable in the ease of movement initiation, particularly when lifting me sitting position, previously often associated with hesitation and blockade. Engine. In approximately 3 months, family members observed a significant reduction in the frequency of gear freezing episodes, especially in spatial transitions such as crossing doors. My formal evaluation after 5 months using standardized scales showed improvement of 27% in parameters, bradykinesia and motor initiation specific. The most emotionally impact significant occurred approximately 8 months after starting the protocol, when I was able to resume simple architectural designs with sufficient manual accuracy. For personal satisfaction, a deeply significant reconnection with my professional identity that had considered permanently lost. Although certainly significant limitations persist, partial motor fluidity recovery, and apparent stabilization in the progression of symptoms provided renewed quality of life and much more optimistic perspective on my future with the disease. To maximize the therapeutic benefits of raw cocoa 100% for intervention in the Parkinson, experts recommend these essential strategies. Consume approximately 18 g daily, specifically cocoa, genuinely raw, non-roasted, processed at low temperatures, and not alkalinized, Dutching process that significantly reduces flavanol's content. Bioactive. Divide consumption into at least 2 servings daily, ideally with an ingestion morning that provides neuroplastic compounds during the period when levels of naturally high BDNF can be synergically enhanced. To optimize bioavailability of critical flavanols, avoid consuming simultaneously with dairy proteins that may limit absorption. Prefer combinations with small amounts of healthy fats that increase bioavailability. To enhance neuroplastic effects, consider strategically synchronize of daily doses approximately 30 to 45 minutes before activities that challenge specifically committed motor functions, potentially optimizing activity dependent on activity. Dr. Ricardo Silva, specialist in regenerative neurology, adds, to patients with early onset Parkinson or with particularly rapid progression, I often recommend an intensified neuroplastic restoration protocol. We start with slightly larger doses, approximately 25 g daily, genuinely raw cocoa, for the first 60 days, often complemented strategically with other natural neuroplastic inductors such as resveratrol and rosmarinic acid in optimized formulations for specific synergism with cocoa flavanols. This initial intensive approach often provides arousing neuroplastic, more robust, reactivating more decisively mechanisms, partially numb adaptive and establishing neurobiological foundation for subsequent sustained compensatory functional reorganization. It is important to note that although 100% raw cocoa is extremely safe for the vast majority of people, individuals with severe gastroesophageal reflux, certain, the caffeine/theobromine sensitive cardiac arrhythmias, or significant insomnia should start with lower doses and potentially limit consumption to the morning. Integrating the 5 foods in a full anti-Parkinson protocol. Now that we explore the 5 transforming oversteep for Parkinson after the age of 60, the practical challenge is effectively integrating them into a daily nutritional protocol that is not only therapeutic, but also palatable and long-term sustainable. The good news is that these foods are nutritionally complementary and can be synergically combined to create what specialized neuroscientists call neuroprotective and neuroadaptive waterfall. Integrated. A strategic approach to incorporating these foods would be to distribute them to over the week and day, maximizing its specific benefits and interactions. Synergists. Breakfast. Daily start the day with a neurometabolically meal, optimized including 2 integers of prepared pasturate chickens, adequately and approximately 10 g of 100% raw cocoa incorporated into proper preparations like smoothies or porridge. This morning combination provides simultaneous support to neuronal membranar regeneration and dopaminergic neuroplasticity when the brain is naturally more responsive. Neuroplastic stimuli after the night consolidation period. Mid-morning, daily a small neuroprotective snack containing approximately 20 g of black sesame seeds, providing critical compounds for partial regeneration of protective neuromelanin during the high period. Morning dopaminergic activity. Lunch, 3 to 4 times a week a meal including approximately 5 g of algae, specific C, in the recommended varieties, providing compounds, synuclein-specific neuroprotectors during the intermediate period of the day. Mid-afternoon, daily second portion of raw cocoa 100%, approximately 8 g, ideally consumed approximately 30 to 45 minutes before periods. Physical activity or specific motor challenges, enhancing neuroplasticity. Activity dependent during therapeutic sessions. Dinner, varied light meal incorporating moderate portions of food. Remaining therapies according to weekly recommendations, strategically. Combined with vegetables rich in antioxidants and healthy fats for support. Optimized mitochondrial. Before bed, 3 to 4 times a week small portion of the specific mixture of medicinal mushrooms, approximately 1.5 g, properly prepared, providing continuous bioenergetic support during regenerative processes. Nights particularly active in the dopaminergic system. Dr. Paulo Torres, a neurologist specializing in integrative medicine for disorders of the movement, he emphasizes, what makes this approach particularly powerful to elderly with Parkinson is its neurobiologically comprehensive nature that addresses simultaneously multiple pathophysiological mechanisms underlying the disease. Unlike conventional pharmacological interventions that typically focus only in symptomatic replacement of dopamine without addressing the underlying causes, progressive neurodegeneration, this specialized nutritional protocol simultaneously protects remaining dopaminergic neurons, restores function, compromised mitochondrial, neutralizes pathological alpha-synuclein aggregation, regenerates structurally committed neural membranes and enhances neuroplastic compensatory mechanisms. Effectively, we are providing to the compromised neuromotor system all biochemical precursors and metabolic moderators necessary for resilience and adaptation at multiple levels. Simultaneously, it is essential to understand that this nutritional protocol works better as part of an integrated strategy that includes properly adapted regular exercise, particularly modalities with specific evidence for Parkinson like Tai Chi, dance, especially tango, progressive resistance training and cycling, sleep optimization, absolutely critical for neuroplasticity consolidation, motor and restoration of dopaminergic reserves, effective management of chronic stress, recognizing the deleterious impact of chronically high cortisol in dopaminergic and neuroprotection function, exposure to sufficient natural light, crucial for our circadian regulation and synthesis, adequate vitamin D neuroimmunomodulator, careful consideration of drug chronobiology, potentially synchronizing pharmacological doses with nutritional interventions for effectiveness. Optimized. Dr. Claudia Martins, an integrative neurorehabilitation specialist, adds, for patients with more advanced Parkinson or particularly fast progression, we often recommend an intensified neuroprotection phase. First 8 to 12 weeks, we strategically maximized the exposure to all 5 components of this protocol, often in slightly increased dosages, and chronologically synchronized with specific physical therapy directed precisely to the most committed motor patterns in each individual patient. This initial intensive approach often provides intervention, more robust neuroprotective, interrupting more decisively waterfalls, active neurodegeneratives and establishing neurobiological foundation for stabilization and more significant functional recovery. For caregivers and family members implementing this protocol for loved ones with more advanced Parkinson with significant impairment of autonomy, experts recommend particular attention to consistency and practical simplicity. Gradually incorporate a therapeutic component at a time, in preparations. Palatable and easily manageable, often results in better adhesion and long-term supported benefits. Conclusion: neuroprotection and functional recovery based on science. When we conclude our exploitation of the 5 transforming overlooking Parkinson's disease after age 60, a message emerges deeply hopeful in advanced neuroscience, motor deterioration, progressive, debilitating tremors, limiting stiffness and eventual loss of independence. Functional associated with Parkinson are not unchanging neurobiological inevitabilities, which will necessarily follow a unidirectional trajectory of aggravation, contrary to the conventional neurological paradigm that often offers fatalistically progressive prognosis accompanied by interventions, decreasing effectiveness and increasing side effects. Evidence. Emerging scientifics show that with adequate nutritional interventions, Many patients may experience not only temporary stabilization of symptoms, but true recovery of significant functional aspects of mobility, even after established diagnosis and documented progression. The 5 overlooking we explore: specific medicinal mushrooms, algae, selected black sesame seeds, pastured chickens, and 100% raw cocoa, not just generic healthy foods. These are interventions, specific neurobiologicals with scientifically validated action mechanisms that directly address the fundamental pathophysiological processes underlying the Parkinson. By restoring the compromised mitochondrial function, neutralization of pathological alpha-synuclein, regeneration of protective neuromelanin, optimization of neuronal membranes and potentialization of neuroplasticity, dopaminergic, these foods offer a truly, frequently absent in conventional pharmacological protocols, centered only on the substitution of temporary dopaminergic. Which makes this approach particularly valuable for people over 60, is that it works harmoniously with the intrinsic neurobiological processes of aged brain, without the potentially problematic side effects associated with conventional pharmacological interventions, often characterized by progressively narrower therapeutic window and complications, iatrogenic motors as dyskinesias. In addition, the benefits extend a lot. In addition to isolated motor symptoms, offering protection against non-motors often neglected from Parkinson as autonomic dysfunction, sleep disorders and cognitive impairment, a holistic consideration, especially important for preserving the quality of global life. As Dr. Ricardo Torres, a pioneer in integrative neuroprotection notes, what we discovered about specific nutrition and dopaminergic neuroprotection in the last decade is fundamentally rewriting our understanding and the potential of brain recovery affected by Parkinson. Contrary to fatalism, prevalent neurological, even significantly committed by established neurodegenerative pathologies often retain surprising regenerative and adaptive capacity when they receive metabolic precursors and appropriate neurobiological mediators. For many patients and families, this represents true liberation of the progressive unidirectional narrative that traditionally accompanies the diagnosis, offering not only hope, abstract, but neurobiologically grounded for preservation, functional, compensatory adaptation and potentially partial recovery of previously committed motor capabilities. For people living with Parkinson and his caregivers, remember, the journey to greater motor stability and potential functional recovery does not require transformations, immediate radical diets, but gradual and consistent incorporation of these foods. Therapeutic. Start by introducing 1 or 2 of these routine overlooking and build from there, patiently observing individualized answers that may vary significantly based on genetic factors, stage of the disease, specific phenotype and concomitant therapies. Work collaboratively with health professionals receptive to integrative medicine to adapt and customize the protocol to your specific needs and unique circumstances. And perhaps the most important thing, it's never too late to start. Be you newly diagnosed with initial Parkinson or living with the condition for decades, the dopaminergic system still has impressive ability to respond positively to adequate therapeutic nutrition. Each movement performed with greater fluidity, each attenuated tremor, and every moment of functional independence reconquered represents a significant victory against this challenging disease. The final message is of founded neurobiological empowerment and hope. Scientifically validated, motor function in Parkinson, even after years of progression, can potentially experience significant stabilization and partial recovery when supported by neurobiologically active nutrients, appropriate. Through these 5 surpluses, we offer not only culinary ingredients, but true neurometabolic mediators who can guide the compromised motor system towards resilience, functional adaptation and preservation of autonomy and dignity that define a full life even before Parkinson's challenges. Which of these overfeeds for intervention at Parkinson you plan to incorporate first in your routine? Share your experience or questions in the comments below. your journey may inspire others to take their first steps toward the neurointegrative approach of this challenging condition after the 60.